Okay, this is the second meeting of the Elyria City Charter Review Commission. The date is August 20th, 2020. The time is approximately 8:08. First order of business, let's have a roll call. I'll call the roll. Kate Smith.
Present.
Terry Schilling, present. Jim Bremer.
Present.
Bill Mercado.
Present.
Sharon Fulcran.
Present.
Okay, we are all here. Now, the first order of business would be the minutes of the July 29th, 20 meeting. Did everybody receive a copy of the minutes? Anybody have any comments or any changes or whatever? If not, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Who moved?
Second.
All right. You guys have your microphones on when you're speaking, though, right? All right. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Hearing none, minutes approved. All right. Now, did everybody get a copy of what we're using as today's agenda? The first thing on the agenda is old business. Does anybody have anything that was raised at the last meeting carried over to this meeting that they want to discuss? I have none. Anybody? Okay, so then we'll go to new business. In conversations and thinking, conversations with Eric and thinking about, I am of the opinion that we ought to try to put together some kind of format of how we're going to receive and allow have the public present to us any amendments they want. And my first thinking is either amendment or an addition, because they can, this isn't just an amendment or change of the charter. It can be, as the charter is written, it can also include any additions, any new things that people want to present or try to add to the charter. But my thinking is they ought to at least be in writing. They ought to, at least to the extent they are going to amend the charter, at least identify the part of the charter that they're intending to have them amended, which would include starting with, the charter is broken down into, starts with various articles and then sections. And I think that if you want to change the existing, it ought to be at least, we ought to know the article and the section that they want to be changed. If they don't know that, because they don't really have a copy of the charter, then we're not going to throw it out. But I think to the extent they can at least help us identify the part of the charter that they want to amend or change or rewrite, that should be part of what's in writing. And then if it's a new addition, have them try to identify that this is something new. So we have we have an idea that's what it is. And then if they want to make an oral presentation, which they can submit it in writing and no oral presentation, or they could submit it in writing and make an oral presentation. And I think we ought to impose some kind of time limit of how long they, going in, they know. Now, the time limit, in my opinion, would be flexible if somebody gets talking and they're making sense, we leave them talk longer. But my experience has been with people coming before this type of group, especially council, etc., after about 5 minutes, they're just repeating themselves. And especially if they're going to submit it in writing, that, they can ramble on, and we don't want people up there that are going to change the whole world in front of us. We don't need that, unless somebody wants to do that. So we'll leave it flexible. My suggestion is we'll put out a format that says 5 minutes, but That's just my suggestion. Does anybody have any thoughts about that time frame or whatever?
Mr. Chair, is that oral presentation an option?
Yes.
So they could solely submit it in
Yes.
writing, should they choose?
Absolutely. You can't tell them that they can only do it, because some people may not want to speak at all, Kate, and I think we ought to allow them to make that choice, but if they're not going to speak, at least make sure they submit it in writing, you know? Yeah, the prime way of submitting it, I would say, be writing.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. So even if they are going to express it orally, they must submit it in writing.
I would say that we should have it in writing because it's easier for us to follow and easier to deal with as we go down if we have it in writing. You know, if somebody comes in here and they don't have it in writing and they'll give us an oral presentation, since this is being recorded, isn't it? We can, yes. We're not going to, you know, we can deal with it, Sharon, but I think the first requirement should be that we get it in writing, because that, sometimes by writing it limits it too, you know, orally they can ramble, writing they may get a little more clarification, a little more concise, so, but I think we need to be flexible.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would you anticipate any kind of deadline prior to a meeting? For example, council, when a referral is made to them, they require that that referral be in, you know, no later than noon on Friday before a Monday meeting.
I will tell you my personal opinion. If they show up at the meeting and want to present it, and that's the first time we see it, I have no problem with that. Does anybody else want a deadline, or to allow people, if they show up and haven't previously submitted, we go ahead and listen to them?
I just have a question on that. So if they come in and present it, we don't have to take action that day?
That's correct, Sharon. All we're going to do for maybe one or two meetings unless we don't have anybody and we have some to review, is primarily be listening and receiving requests. And then what I think we should do is, once we get the request in, we'll see if everybody gets a copy and they can take them with them and look them over and see what they think. And then at the next meeting, maybe we'll have as part of the meeting a discussion on what we already have had. If after people, we'll go with the people that appear first, so they don't have to wait around. And then we can have a discussion, have discussion of what was previously been submitted, because we're not going to be here, but I would say our meetings are going to, up until the time we get close to when we have to do a final report, I don't anticipate meeting more than an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours max. You know? I don't see any reason to be here all night. Does that answer your question, Sharon?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Then my understanding is that this constituency or this public member will come forward with this suggestion for change. We'll receive it, obviously, discuss it amongst our members,
right,
and then decide whether or not to present it to chamber, or will we automatically refer it to chamber?
That's part of our job, to determine if we feel it should go on to the city council. We can pass everything on, or we can edit it, and that's kind of going to depend on what it is and how we start seeing and how we start. We're going to get a feel sooner or later about what should go in the charter, what should not, and but it's up to us. I'm thinking we're going to do more pass on than screening, but we'll do some screening.
And then as far as the notification of the public, say newspaper will notify them of this particular meeting, or will they just come forward with these at a random?
Because I think right now our primarily notice is on the website, isn't it?
We have published newspaper notice for both meetings so
Okay,
far.
so the meetings are being published then, yeah. And so we should hopefully start probably maybe about, let's see, next meeting, didn't we say we want primarily the next meeting to be any representative of the city and council?
Yes, and I've already spoken to the Administrative Legal Counsel about that and telling him that we would, after this meeting, have a process for the submission and to anticipate to get us any proposed changes at that next meeting.
Okay, and then the next meeting after that probably would be the general public, and then maybe another meeting to kind of anybody that didn't make it to the first two, and then maybe one more meeting to wrap it up if all goes well, but we'll see.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other questions? Kate, you had a question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, in our meeting last week, our final meeting was scheduled for December 10th. And so then should we announce a final deadline for submissions, if they're to be in writing perhaps of that Monday, or we need to somehow announce at least some sort of finality to the public?
What about the November meeting?
Mr.
And
Chairman?
use the,
November 12th would then be the
or you
final
think that's
opportunity
too
to
soon?
submit?
Well, then my question is, what I would like to do is have that December meeting be our final meeting where we actually review everything and come to a report that we're going to submit to council. And if that's the case, we should request that all proposals be submitted by November 12th with the understanding that if somebody comes afterwards, we're not going to,
Mhm. Yes, sir.
but so we don't have a flood that last meeting, unless we want to go into the new year. But I think there's going to be a little play by ear as we go down the road on this.
And if someone is to submit something in writing, can it come to any one of us, or should it be submitted to the law director's office? What is the procedure for someone to submit in writing?
I would say primarily the law director's office, but if somebody, like they come to my office or they come to Bill's office or Sharon's or yours and gives you something in writing and ask it to be submitted to the Charter Review Commission, I'd say take it. But we primarily want them, or do we have an email, is there an email address that will be used?
We could use my email address.
Yeah, I think that should be out there too, that email address that.
What I can do once we finalize the submission process, Mr. Chairman, is I can reduce that to writing and publish it along with the notice for the next meeting.
I think that would be fine, Mr. Rooney, so that because that's probably where, in this day and age, most of them be submitted unless they want to come personally. And I think that's the email address to use. We should not be using our personal email. We don't want our personal email addresses out there.
Right. We don't have a dedicated email set up for this, but I mean, I'm advising the commission at this point, and I have no problem receiving those and passing them along to the rest of you for review before a meeting. It's what we've been doing anyways.
Okay, then I think that should be part of that'd be part of the minutes and because when we get all discussion, we'll have a motion to try to adopt these rules and go forward. Any other questions? Anybody have any other questions or thoughts they want to talk about before we move forward on the format? Let me just kind of reiterate. The format is going to be that to the extent they can be done, all requests for any change, modification, revision, or addition, we are going to require that they be submitted in writing. If they're going to do an oral presentation, they do not have to do an oral presentation. If they're going to do an oral presentation, we want to limit it to 5 minutes. They can submit them through we'll publish the email address, or they can deliver them to city. It's going to be hard for them to deliver to the city hall because City Hall is not open, is it?
So it is now partially open during limited hours through certain doors, but I still think the easiest way is online. And just to update you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Henderson just provided me information. We can establish a dedicated email address for the commission for this. So we will publish that.
I think that's a very good idea, and that should be the main way. But each commission member, if they know somebody or somebody says, hey, I hear you're part of the commission, can I submit something to you? I would say that's fine. Does anybody have any objection to letting somebody give them a what they want us to review? Anybody?
And I would just request that if anyone receives something like that, they pass it on to me as soon as possible. That way we can, again, put it in a written format and get it to the rest of you. So you can have as much advanced review before the meeting as possible that way.
Okay, well, that way we can kind of get it to everybody else then. So they can, because I would think we ought to try to get some, so we can do some review between meetings. So we have an idea, and then till we get them all, and get some idea of the flavor of what these things are going to be like. Is there anything else need to be in that motion? Other than, we did talk about the 5-minute rule and in writing.
If there's a new addition to it, we would identify that as best as possible. I don't remember if you said that.
Yeah, and that if it's a revision of the charter itself, to the extent they can, give us the article and the section of the charter, because that's the way it's broken down.
And a preferred final deadline of November 12th.
Yeah, you're right, Kate. We would like to have all things submitted by November 12th. Any further discussion? Anyone who's going to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is that you, Phil? All right, second?
Seconded.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as?
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye, opposed nay. Okay, that carries. Now, the next order of business really is a review of the current charter. Does anybody have any questions about, they want to ask about the current charter that they think would be helpful to, and we have nobody here from the public, so I don't know. Does anybody have any questions offhand that they might want to discuss at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I have several questions, and part of it is just the fact that I'm new to the process, and so some of the language I'm not sure about, so I just have a couple questions.
Go right ahead.
I'll start with my first question in terms of enforcement of the items in the charter. It's written, where is the metric of enforcement? Do we have it, or does that requirement to enforce belong somewhere else?
There's two ways that it would primarily require how you would comply with the charter. One, there are certain provisions in the charter that require you to do certain things in a certain manner, and it would be through the charter you would say, hey, you violated the charter. What the penalty is would depend then if we have a city ordinance that backs it up. And the second part would be that there, over the years, there's been many, many city ordinances that have implemented the charter, and that would be where they would be enforced also through the various charter ordinances that have been enacted in the last, 50 years? 60 years? I think the charter was, 1960? Somewhere in that vicinity?
I want to say it was around 1957, 58.
Oh, 65.
65,
It says right at the
thank
top.
you.
So there's been a lot of ordinances that have been passed that would give a lot of meat to this. It's the same way with the U.S. Constitution. It lays out certain principles, and then it's up to the legislative body to see that it's fulfilled. Do you have any specific questions that,
I do.
Sharon, that you
I do.
want to address?
Article 3 section 3.03, as it relates to the last, paragraph, where it talks about, redividing the wards after the census. And I didn't see any, modifications listed below or amendments. So I was just wondering, I don't know that I have read or heard of any redistricting, around the city of Elyria. So I was just wondering, does that actually happen?
It does, and here's how it happens. That's one of the things that happens with the census.
Mm-hmm.
Once the census figures are in, because and it starts really with the principle under the U.S. Constitution called one person, one vote. And what happens is once the census is done, I think it's through the college. They have a service, or there's a service that looks at the population of the city and relates it to the wards that exist. And then they say, okay, there are more people in certain wards than other people, and as a result, because they need to even out the wards, they will then say, here's the new boundaries that you need to do in order to do that. And that has been done in the city of Elyria a number of times, where the ward boundaries have changed because the population has shifted. And so that process does go on, and there's some ordinances on it, and we have the U.S. Supreme Court and Constitution and other laws that have told us that's how we have to do it. But it does happen, Sharon, and has happened. But and the last time it happened was after the last census came in, and it'll happen again
Next year.
if the city has grown in certain parts and there's too many people in one ward, they'll change the boundaries to adjust it. So the whole idea is that each of the 7 wards has pretty much the same population. There may be a here and there, but it's got to be a small, very small percentage of differences.
Okay, thank you for that. Also, I just wondered, I noticed that there's an editor's note in several places as it relates to Charter Section 23.01, and it's mentioned in Section 3, and actually I think it was mentioned several places. But the only question I have is, in order to change the language as it applies, every change has to go on the ballot?
Every change to the charter, as the charter is written, has to be approved by the voters.
So going
Council
forward.
itself cannot, by itself, change the charter.
Okay. So going forward, in this particular case, that 23.01,
23.01, is that the article?
yeah, it impacted several other sections of the charter.
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Chairman, that's the section that changed the date of taking offices.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, what's your question, Sharon?
Well, my point is, going forward, if we're going to change something that affects something else,
Right.
would you put everything on the ballot saying, if you pass it, it will also change this particular article, this particular section? Or will you always, going forward, have an editor's note to reflect the change?
You probably will, because there may be certain provisions in there that one change would affect more than one part of the provision, of the charter.
Yes.
And that has happened. You know, since I've been involved, the terms have changed 3 or 4 times. The starting date and the ending date, for various reasons. It used to be, I know they had like the first Monday in December. It used to be the first of the year. I forget what it was, and but it really depends on the language of the amendment, where it may change a term. Like one of the changes they changed many years ago, when I first started in my position with the legal, my title was law director. Well, the law director's title was later changed because they had another position called solicitor. Well, I have been both. And when I went from law director to solicitor, they decided, well, nobody really knows what a solicitor is, so we're going to change the title of solicitor to law director. So every place in the charter where the word solicitor was, when we approved the change of the title to law director, that automatically changed every position, every part of the charter that would mention the law director. And then we had to change the title of law director to, and that became the administrative legal counsel. And the difference between the two is one's appointed, one's elected. The law director is elected, the administrative legal counsel is appointed. So wherever that would appear. And then there may be other times, depending on what you change, could affect, and you may always have an editor's note. Now, and I can tell you an example that Eric and I just recently discussed. Which section was that,
4.12 and 4.13. 4.12 and 4.13.
Yeah. What, if I remember correctly there?
It was the referral of zoning ordinances to planning commission.
Yeah. We changed the time frame, in 4.12, we changed the time frame of when things get referred to the planning commission, they have to go to council. Originally, it was 90 days. In 4.12, it got changed to 60 days. But in 4.13, they didn't change it. And it should have been changed. And that's an example where they didn't pick up the change. So that's going to be one of those provisions that's going to probably come before us to change, because that's really to make it consistent with a prior change. But that's the type of thing sometimes they will pick up in the editor note saying, well, you changed here, you had to change here. Well, otherwise things do get changed to the extent that the people that do our codifications, and then council would and ultimately approve that part of the change. But the actual language itself generally has to go to the voters. You have another question?
One more.
Go right ahead, Sharon.
This just really struck me. 3.02,
3.02?
second paragraph. And I'm sure there's a valid reason, I just didn't understand it. Second paragraph, second statement, it says, who is finally convicted of a felony?
You're talking about 3.02?
Yes, second paragraph. First sentence reads, any member of council who shall cease to possess or who violates any of the qualifications of office herein provided. And then the next statement starts, who is finally convicted. And that word finally stood out to me as if you are anticipating that they're getting convicted, but right. So from a legal perspective, that's not what it means.
No, what it means, unless you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
What it means is that if you get convicted and you finally have exhausted all appeals of overturning that conviction, which can be who knows how long, that's what I would say they mean by finally.
Thank you.
So you could stay in office for a couple of years, to be truthful, based on that. Any other questions, Sharon? Okay, Phil, you have any? Jim? Kate?
Mr. Chair, I have more general questions. Are we aware, or is the Assistant Law Director aware of any other provisions within the charter that are currently at odds with our ordinances? If you don't have that right now, then for next time.
That is one that I have been aware of, that I've been meaning to change for some time, and I wanted to have a specific discussion with Mr. Schilling, one that I will bring before you formally. I'm not aware of any other direct conflicts, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any, and that's part of the solicitation process. We'll be asking from city personnel and from the public to see if anybody has noticed any of those.
Thank you.
I would like at this time to acknowledge, I see that our mayor has entered. Mayor Whitfield, welcome. Glad to have you here. Do you have anything you want to say? Anybody have any objection to the mayor speaking to us?
No, sir.
Okay, yeah, you make sure you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all the committee members for doing this important work and reviewing our charter. You know, we don't get this opportunity often to be able to do this, and I trust that you all are taking this as serious as possible. And I was excited to just hear that you will be engaging with the city staff and the community and getting their feedback about this as well. It's not every so often you get to reimagine things, you know, and I just want to encourage you all to take this opportunity. You're in a unique position to be able to reimagine how we do things as a city. And there's some areas where there has been some challenge and conflict just from a management standpoint. I'll make sure that we share those with you all. But I do believe you just got a great opportunity right now to kind of reimagine how the city is run. So just want to encourage you to take advantage of that. And thank you for the opportunity to come say hey to you all.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. And I agree with what you just said, but I think the reimagining and the changes of those type of things, we need input from those that are experiencing and utilizing them as they work with the city. So we would appreciate whatever you feel you want to present to us. We feel we're going to be open to listening.
Okay.
And
thank you.
That's really our job.
Yeah.
You know, whatever.
Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in regards to engaging the community, I was wondering if there's any interest in not just doing notices on the website, and I think, is there any interest in using social media as well to submit notices and try to increase engagement with the commission from the community?
You know, you got to understand, I'm a little bit of the old school. I don't have a problem with that myself. You know, I'm not into, I stay away from it because of some of the things I hear, but if that's one way we can get more people involved, because I think we do it, and I think the mayor's right, and I think that's what he just told us, is that this is an opportunity to get as many people involved in their governmental process, because, you know, in my opinion, the most basic freedom and right we have is the right to petition your government. And this is a golden opportunity for the general public to actually say, hey, what are you guys doing? Here's how we would like you to do it. Now, it may not make sense, but we can at least listen and give them the opportunity. So if that would help, Jim, I would say do what we can. Does anybody have any objection to that? I would say fine. Let's see what we can do if we can. I don't know.
If you're looking at me, I don't have the first clue, so.
Can you help with that, Mayor? We'd appreciate it, because he's right, and what you said, and that would help expand what we're doing. So let's see what we can do.
And Mr. Chair, I think once the public notices are prepared with all of these procedural matters and these parameters, I think it's also up to all of us to share it wherever we can with city group pages and, you know, LinkedIn group pages and Nextdoor and all of those places that we can to assist with this democratic process.
Does anybody have anything else? I think we do have to deal with one other issue, if I'm not mistaken. Unfortunately, Mr. Jim has decided that he is going to, well, not fortunately, but for him, and we congratulate him and applaud him, he is going to go into the armed services. And
Yes, sir. Oh, thank you.
Joining the U.S. Army.
That's right,
And
Mr.
I
Chairman.
think you're also, I think Eric told me you are, through that process, are relocating out of Elyria. When's that actually going to happen?
So that's why I was hopeful that I'd be able to continue my work on the commission, because I don't leave until November 16th for basic training. Now, I'd be missing the last meeting, of course, but in preparation for that move, I'm actually moving back to my dad's house, and he lives just a block outside of the city limits in Amherst Township. So, of course, that makes me ineligible to be on the commission,
Right.
which is why I'm submitting my resignation today.
Well, regretfully, I'll entertain a motion to accept Jim's resignation. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
I'll regretfully second.
Any discussion? Jim, we wish you luck. All in favor of accepting Jim's resignation, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay.
God-
All right, well then, what will have to happen, Eric, is we will now have to pass that on to the city council?
I have already discussed this pending opening with President Stewart, and he is making the appropriate arrangements.
Yeah, you know, Jim, if you weren't really moving, but I think because the more important work's coming, and we needed, you know, there's times you're gonna be here that probably what you're doing now is probably the best way to handle what you're doing, and let's get somebody on board, hopefully, by the next meeting, because will council address it at its September, what's their first meeting, the 8th?
Yes. And I believe the answer to that is yes, Mr. Chairman, based on my conversation with President Stewart. But with council, you of course never know until it actually happens.
That's true. They may, the problem is our next meeting is September 10th, isn't it? Isn't that the next meeting?
That's correct.
But we have 4, so we can still carry on.
Yes.
If needed.
And if I'm not mistaken, the discussions that you and I had, Mr. Chairman, were mostly that most of these meetings, and I think you referenced it here earlier, these are going to be listening and discussion, and then, submitting the final report is when you'll really need to take, affirmative voting action.
Right. I think, yeah, you're right, that essentially we're going to be listeners up until we finally decide, okay, we've heard everything, now we're going to make some decisions. You're right, and that's going to happen probably, later, so.
Right.
Does anybody have anything else we need to discuss at this time? Any thoughts or anything? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Thank you very much, and good luck to you, Jim. And thanks for all your
Thank you, Jim.
participation in this
Seriously,
meeting.
thank you. Yeah, be safe.